Master Sergeant Clegg pulled the mission folder from Faulk's hands without a word of warning. Not aggressively, almost casually, the way you'd take a coffee cup off a table before someone knocked it over by accident. He held it at his side and looked down at her, and he was a big man, Clegg, 6'2" and 230, built on 2 decades of field work, and he said loud enough for every man near the doorway to hear every syllable. "These aren't for contractor personnel, ma'am. You want to wait in the S1 office. Someone will come find you when we're ready." Faulk looked at him. She didn't move. She didn't reach for the folder. She just looked at him with those steady gray eyes, and the expression on her face was the expression of a person who had heard this before. Not this exact speech, maybe, but this song, in every key, from every direction, and had long ago made peace with the fact that the hearing of it was not going to end. She said nothing. The men near the doorway exchanged looks. Someone in the back made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh, but was shaped like one, and that was enough. It spread. Not all of it mean, not all at once, but enough of it, and some of it was shaped in a very specific way. The kind that says you don't belong here, and the suggestion itself is the joke. That kind came mostly from Clegg and from 2 of the younger Marines near the side wall, and it lasted just long enough to mean something. She stood in the center of that sound and didn't move and didn't flinch and didn't look away from Clegg. And that stillness, that one specific, deliberate, total stillness, was the beginning of something that nobody in that room was prepared for. Forward Operating Base Tanner sat on a flat stretch of northeastern Syrian desert that the locals called the Burned Plain, because in summer the ground cracked open in long parallel lines like something trying to escape from below. It was March when Faulk arrived, which meant the temperature had dropped to something survivable, but the dust was still everywhere. In your teeth, in your gear seams, in the back of your throat. And the wind off the escarpment to the north came loaded with grit that you felt long after you'd gone indoors. The Marines at FOB Tanner were not a unit that invited comparison to anything less than the best. Gunnery Sergeant Barrow had 3 combat deployments, and a Bronze Star he never mentioned. Captain Ree had planned interdiction operations in 3 different countries and spoke with the quiet certainty of a man who had been wrong about important things exactly twice in his career and had learned from both. Colonel Theus, commanding officer, had been running direct action operations in region for 11 months, and the record on his wall, classified to a level that Barrow himself hadn't been fully briefed on, contained achievements that his subordinates knew about only in the way you know about weather systems. You feel the effects without seeing the cause. These were men who took their work seriously because the world had given them very specific reasons to. Which was exactly why, when the civilian-marked pickup rolled through the main gate at 0715 on a Tuesday morning, and a single woman climbed out of the passenger seat. No body armor, no rank visible, canvas bag she'd been jacket, moving, like she was arriving somewhere she'd been before and wasn't particularly concerned about impressing anyone. The reaction was immediate and almost unanimously predictable. Lance Corporal Duff, 20 years old, 8 months into his first deployment, was standing near the vehicle pool when she stepped out. He watched her cross the dust toward the command building and said to the man next to him quietly, as though filling space, "Think she's Red Cross?" "Definitely not Red Cross," the man said. "Look at the boots." "Dodd contractor, maybe." "She walks like she owns the place," said the man, and the way he said it was not a compliment. By the time she had crossed 30 meters of open ground, the commentary had already threaded through the base the way things thread through enclosed places where people have too much time and too little novelty, instantly, completely, without editorial. Pentagon oversight, intel review. Civilian evaluation team, the kind that shows up every 6 months and makes everyone miserable for a week before going home to write a report nobody reads. She heard all of it. You could tell she heard it in the way she walked. Not faster, not slower, not scanning for the source of the voices. Just walking with the exact same quality of purpose she'd had when she stepped out of the truck. The kind of walk that comes from spending enough time in rooms that had already decided who you were before you opened your mouth, enough time that your legs have learned to move through that decision without being slowed by it. Clegg intercepted her just outside the S2 building. His manner was professionally neutral, which for Clegg was the manner of a man who had decided something and was giving you the courtesy of a procedural explanation. "Ma'am, I need credentials and authorization before you go any further." She reached into the canvas bag, produced a sealed envelope, handed it to him. He opened it, read the first page, read it again. The expression on his face didn't change exactly, but something shifted behind it, some recalibration. He looked at the clearance level printed at the top of the second page and said, "This is above my authorization to verify on site." "I know," she said. "You'll need to call Colonel Theus directly." Clegg looked at her. "You know the Colonel?" "We've never met," she said. "He's expecting the call." The pause that followed was the pause of a man who had been completely certain about something 15 seconds ago, and was now significantly less. He said, "Wait here," and went inside, and she waited, and she didn't check her phone, and she didn't shift her weight, and she stood in the March wind in a posture of absolute patience while Clegg was inside for 6 minutes discovering whatever Colonel Theus told him. When Clegg came back, he was holding himself differently. "You're cleared for the briefing room," he said. His voice had changed enough that the 3 men watching from 20 meters away noticed it, even if they couldn't have named exactly what had changed. "Thank you, Sergeant," she said and walked past him. Clegg stood in the doorway and watched her go, and for one unguarded moment his face showed something that the men nearby didn't have enough context to understand. He looked like a man who had just put his hand on something solid and found it hollow. The mission briefing at 0800 drew every operator, intelligence analyst, and attached specialist FOB Tanner had on site. 24 people in a room built for 18, filling the extra space with the specific dense quiet of professionals who take serious things seriously. Colonel Theis stood at the front next to a satellite projection of a compound in the Deir ez-Zor region east of the Euphrates. He was a lean man, economical in his movements, with the kind of authority that didn't require volume. 4 months ago, Theis said, a network operating out of this compound began placing pressure-activated IEDs along 3 resupply corridors. In those 4 months, 14 American service members have been killed. The network is led by one individual who has evaded capture through 3 previous operations. He clicked to the next image, a face, mid-40s, eyes that looked like they'd been studying the camera rather than the other way around. Current intelligence puts him at this compound. Barrow, 3 seats from the front with his arms crossed, said, "What's the exfil window?" 8 minutes. Guard rotation creates the only viable approach on the eastern side. The primary threat is an elevated observation post on the northern ridge. He pointed to a position on the topographic overlay. An overwatch shooter would need to cover that post at 100 meters to neutralize it and maintain suppressive capability during approach. The room processed that. 100 in daytime, Barrow said. "What are the conditions?" Theis clicked to the atmospheric data. Daytime operation. Only viable window in the next 72 hours. Surface temperature at the target will be pushing 102. Thermal shimmer from the ground will create significant mirage effect from 600 meters outward. Barrow was quiet. Mirage effect. The lateral distortion heat shimmer creates at range, bending the apparent position of a target several inches from its actual location in ways that shift constantly and cannot be fully compensated for by standard ranging data. Was not an unsolvable problem, but it required a very specific level of expertise to solve in real time. The kind that came not from training alone, but from accumulated hours under exactly these conditions, in this specific light, at this atmospheric pressure. FOB Tanner had good shooters, 3 qualified past 800 meters. None of them had worked sustained thermal shimmer conditions at this distance with this kind of operational timeline. Theis looked around the room, nobody spoke. And then from the back, without emphasis or preamble, "I can take that position." The silence lasted maybe 2 seconds. Then the room laughed. Not all of it, not all the same kind, but enough of it, and some of it was shaped in a very specific way, the kind that says the suggestion itself is the joke. That shape came mostly from Clegg and from 2 of the younger Marines near the wall, and it lasted just long enough to mean something. She waited. When it died down, she said, "I'm not joking." Her voice had the particular flatness of someone who has said this sentence before, in rooms like this, and has learned that the most efficient response to disbelief is to let it run out of oxygen on its own. Clegg said, "Ma'am, a shot at that distance in active shimmer during a timed operation requires a confirmed precision shooter with direct combat experience in desert atmospheric conditions. I don't know what your background is, but my name is on the op attachment, she said. Level 4, Section 3, you should read it. Clegg looked at Thies. Thies was already looking at her, and his expression was the expression of a man who had heard enough on a secure phone the previous evening to look at someone differently than the room currently was. Range, he said, 1,400 hours. By 1350, 41 men had found reasons to be at the Eastern Range. Money was moving. Duff had $20 on her, not clearing the first target. He was beginning to think this might have been a mistake because something about the way Barrow had carried himself since that briefing, arms unfolded, body slightly forward, the posture of a man paying close attention rather than polite attention, had introduced a persistent doubt that Duff couldn't locate the source of, but also couldn't dismiss. She arrived at exactly 1400 with a rifle case no one recognized. Long, flat black, no manufacturer markings on the exterior. She opened it on the bench and the weapon inside was not standard issue anything. Several of the more experienced men identified it as a highly modified precision system, the kind of equipment that reached very specific hands through channels not listed in any public procurement record. Barrow, at the back of the crowd with his arms folded again, said nothing. He watched her settle into position, watched her adjust the bipod with 2 small movements, both efficient, watched her check the wind indicators twice, then a third time, and then do something with her eyes that he had seen only a handful of times in 19 years with precision shooters. They went briefly inward, focused on a calculation happening in her head rather than in the scope, and then went still. The crowd of 41 men went quiet without being asked. The first target was at 600 meters, expected. Anyone shooting at this level could clear 600. She put 3 rounds through the center. The third went through the hole left by the second. The crowd did not laugh. It made a different sound, low, collective, the sound of people revising a number they had already calculated. She shifted to 900 meters without being asked. The heat shimmer was active now. You could see it from the firing line, that slow, sinuous distortion rising off the ground between the shooter and the target, bending the sight picture in ways that changed from second to second. The kind of thing that turns confirmed confidence into educated guessing for most shooters. Because the variables are too dynamic and too numerous to hold simultaneously while doing everything else a precision shot requires. She watched the shimmer for 40 seconds. Nobody rushed her. Nobody made a sound. She fired. Hit, said the spotter. A pause. Dead center. Barrow unfolded his arms. She fired twice more. The spotter went quiet for a moment. His voice when it came back was more careful. The voice of someone aware that what they're reporting sounds implausible and wants to be precise. 3 rounds, he said. Identical group at 900. He paused. In the shimmer. Duff was very still. $20, he was thinking. And also something else. Some harder thought about the ease of the assumption he'd made at the vehicle pool that morning. The conviction of it. The way it had required no evidence at all. She moved to 1,100 meters. The atmosphere around the range changed again. Not the same change as before. That had been people updating a prediction. This was different. This was 41 men who were no longer certain about anything they had been certain about an hour ago, watching something that was not fitting into the available categories. Clegg had not moved from his position near the front. His jaw was set. His expression was the expression of a man working very hard to hold on to a version of events that the evidence in front of him was actively dismantling, because if he let go of it, he would have to reckon with what he had said that morning in the S2 building, and more importantly, how he had said it, and in front of whom. She held position at 1,100 for a long moment, reading the shimmer. The range flags moved with the irregular lateral drift that made calculations significantly harder because there was no linear pattern to work against. She fired, hit, fired again, hit, fired a third time. The spotter said, "Sir," and addressed Thies directly. "I'm reading a 3-round group at 1,100. The shimmer was significant on all 3 shots. I need you to confirm what I'm seeing." "I'm reading you," Thies said. The silence that followed lasted about 4 seconds, and in those 4 seconds, 41 men stood on an eastern Syrian firing range in March and said nothing at all. Then Barrow stepped forward and picked up a spotting scope from the equipment table, brought it to his eye, and looked at the 1,100-meter target for a long time. Then he lowered it. He was not a man whose face made emotions easy to read, because 19 years of fieldwork had built a professional surface over whatever happened underneath. But what was on his face in that moment was not the face of a man who had been wrong. It was the face of a man who had just seen something he hadn't known existed. He looked at her across the range. She was already adjusting her scope for the next distance, which no one had set a target at, because no one had thought they'd need to. At 0300, Barrow found her in the common area with a topographic map spread on the table, and a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He sat down without asking. She looked up. "You're not going to tell me to get some sleep," she said. "Would it do any good?" "No." He looked at the map. She had marked it in pencil, small, precise marks. He recognized them immediately because they were the same marks he'd been making on maps for 19 years. Sight lines, wind lanes, elevation change calculations. "You've already worked the approach vectors," he said. "3 of them." She touched the map. "This one is cleanest." He studied the position she indicated, then touched a second point on the ridge. "Why not here?" "Rock composition at that elevation creates an updraft during the day. The shimmer there will be worse than baseline, and the pattern won't be readable because the convection cycle is irregular." She looked at him steadily. "I mapped it from the surface temperature data and from watching the range this afternoon. The shimmer at this position will be manageable." Barrow stared at the map for a moment. Then he looked at her directly for the first time since the range. "How long have you been doing this?" She wrapped both hands around the cold coffee cup. "Long enough." "That's not an answer." "No," she said, "it's not." She was quiet for a moment, "Long enough that my designation in 7 of the 9 operational records I appear in is a code number, not my name, a number." Barrow said nothing. "The first time," she said without him asking, "I told myself it didn't matter. The point, the people who came home." She paused. "That was true. It is still true. But true things can also be incomplete." She looked at the map. The 6th operation was in Mosul, 2017. A 2-man sniper team was pinned down in a market complex with no extraction path. The official report says they were extracted through a western corridor after the flanking positions were suppressed. A pause. The official report doesn't explain who suppressed those positions, or from where, or how 4 elevated firing posts were neutralized in under 3 minutes from a distance that put them outside the documented capability of anyone deployed on that operation. Barrow was very still. "That was me," she said simply, "and the men who came home never knew my name. The mission log listed the positions as neutralized by unknown asset. Source classified, see Annex R. There is no Annex R." She looked at him. "There never was." Barrow pressed one hand flat on the map. He was doing something with his face that was the equivalent of a complicated calculation, working through the gap between what he had believed was true 24 hours ago and what was apparently true now, and discovering that the gap was much larger than he had prepared for. "How many operations?" he said. 9, in 8 years. She paused. "There should have been more. There were missions I wasn't deployed on where I could have helped, where the outcomes would have been different. But there are people in positions of authority who find it difficult to allocate a resource they didn't expect to exist. So they use me when every other option has been exhausted. And when the mission succeeds, the result is attributed in ways that don't require anyone to explain the asset." Barrow sat back. He understood the machinery she was describing, the way credit moved, the assumptions baked into how operations were staffed and documented. He had benefited from that machinery. He had never, until this moment, sat across from someone who had been systematically excluded from it. "That's wrong," he said. "Yes," she said, "it is." They sat in silence. Then Barrow said, "What's your name?" "Your real name, not a clearance designation." She looked at him for a beat longer than necessary. "Faulk," she said, "Sergeant Nola Faulk." "Barrow," he said, "Gunnery Sergeant." "I know," she said. "I read your record before I came here. Your decision on the Eastern Euphrates corridor in 2018, the secondary approach instead of the direct route. Most commanders would have taken the direct route. You didn't. That saved 11 men." Barrow stared at her. "That operation is classified." "Above field grade," she said. "I had the clearance." Something almost like warmth moved across her expression, brief and genuine. "I don't say it to impress you. I say it because you deserve to know that someone read your record and understood what you actually did. Barrow looked at her for a long moment. Then, against every professional instinct 19 years had built, he almost smiled. Okay, he said quietly. Okay. And something shifted between them in that moment. Not friendship exactly, not yet, but the foundation of something that could become trust. The specific bond that forms between people operating at similar altitudes who have finally, unexpectedly, found each other. The mission launched at 0230. Faulk reached the overwatch position on the northern ridge 11 minutes after insertion, exactly as she'd told Theus she would need. Her voice on the encrypted command channel was identical in quality to how it had been when they'd last spoken. Unhurried, complete zero acoustic evidence of the climb that had just taken her up 600 meters of ridgeline in full kit, in the dark. Overwatch established. Sight lines confirmed. Thermal gradient within calculated parameters. You have a clear approach corridor. Barrow, staged with the assault element 400 meters from the compound perimeter, released a breath he'd been holding for the better part of an hour. Beside him, Ree gave the signal. The team moved. The first 6 minutes were clean. Then the northern observation post went active. Not on schedule. 15 minutes early, a guard outside his rotation, standing at the edge of the elevated position with a direct sight line down the approach corridor. North post, unscheduled, single guard elevated sight line on your current vector. Ree, flat against the ground, said hold. The team went still. 400 meters of open ground between them and the compound wall, a guard looking in their direction. 27 seconds. North post returning to interior. Pattern resumed. You have your window. Move now. The team moved. At 0318, Ree's voice came over the net. Team at wall. 8 minutes to breach. Copy Overwatch is live. East face clear. Roof perimeter. Wait. 3 seconds. Roof east, arm position. He wasn't on any satellite pass. He's new. Can you clear it? Ree said. Checking angle. A pause. Yes, on your signal. Take it. The shot traveled 1,100 meters through desert air that was, at 0320 in March, finally cold and finally still, without the thermal distortion that had made the range demonstration look like a different order of thing entirely. In those conditions, in that specific dark, it was not a different order of thing. It had never been. It had just required a specific kind of person. The roof position went silent. East roof clear. Proceed. The breach team hit the gate. The compound erupted, not from the breach charge, which was surgical, but from a secondary alert system, not in any of Ree's intelligence package. And within seconds, the operation shifted from controlled entry to active contact, and 2 positions opened simultaneously from the western wall and the inner courtyard. Barrow went flat behind a stone structure, called it completely controlled. West wall, 2 positions, taking fire. I see them. West wall position 1. Clear 2. Move left, Barrow. Move left now. Barrow moved left. The second burst hit the ground exactly where he had been. West wall clear. Courtyard position is inside my sight line. On your command. Take it, Ree said. The courtyard went quiet. All elements perimeter is clear. You have the interior. Move. What happened in the next 4 minutes was the particular organized violence of professionals executing under pressure, each person doing exactly what they had trained to do, each trusting the others without needing to verify. Ree took the interior. Barrow held the perimeter. Faulk held everything above ground level from the ridgeline alone, in the dark, with no spotter, no backup, no one nearby, to share the weight of what was happening or what might happen. At 0341, Ree's voice came through stripped of everything that wasn't information. We have him. Primary objective secure. Moving to exfil. At FOB Tanner's command post, Thies pressed his radio once and said, outstanding work, and then said nothing else for a while, because he was looking at the tactical display and there was nothing that needed to be added to what he was watching. She came off the helicopter at 0412, dirty, cold, moving with the specific heaviness of a body that has been held at absolute stillness for hours and is only now being asked to move again. Rifle case over one shoulder, canvas bag over the other, the same bag she'd arrived with. She looked up and stopped. Standing on the landing pad in the pre-dawn dark were 31 Marines and attached personnel. Not in any formation anyone had ordered. Just standing there, having gotten up in the dark because they had chosen to be there, Duff was near the back. Clegg was near the front, holding himself with a formal attention that was the posture of a man who wants to communicate something that the words available to him are not adequate to contain. Colonel Theus stepped forward. He raised his hand to his forehead in a salute that had nothing to do with protocol. It was about something older and more specific. One professional acknowledging another, done in public, in front of witnesses. Because some things need to be done in front of witnesses. Because some debts are created in public and can only begin to be repaid the same way. She stood there for a moment, then she returned it. One by one, without being told to, every person on that pad followed. Barrow was the last. He held the salute a beat longer than the rest. Not for ceremony, but because he needed that one additional second to let the full weight of the past 40 hours settle completely into his understanding of what a person could be and do and carry without anyone knowing they were carrying it. She looked at all of them. Then she walked through them toward the debrief building because the operation wasn't complete until the debrief was done, and she was not a person who left things incomplete. As she passed Barrow, he heard her say something very quiet, not to him, maybe not to anyone, just words moving out of a person who had held them long enough. Next problem, she said, not bitterly, not with pride, with the specific forward-facing piece of someone who has done what they came to do and is already thinking about what comes next, because that is the only direction available to her and always has been. Clegg found her in the equipment room during post-operation maintenance on the rifle. He stood in the doorway for a long moment before she looked up. Sergeant Faulk, he said, not ma'am, not sweetheart, her name. She waited. He looked uncomfortable in the specific way honest discomfort looks on someone who is not performing it or seeking sympathy for it. The folder, he said, the S2 room, yesterday morning. You don't. I need to say it. He kept his eyes on hers. I was wrong. Not just wrong about you, wrong about how I decided. It took me 4 seconds. I had no information, and I acted as though I had all of it. A pause. I want you to know that I know that. She looked at him for a moment, not coldly, not warmly, but directly, the way she looked at everything, seeing it for what it actually was. Okay, she said. He said. I appreciate it, she said, and she meant it. He nodded and left, and she went back to the rifle, because it needed to be done, and she was not a person who left things undone. Thea's response from command came back in 48 hours. He read it twice, then called Barrow into the office and handed it across the desk without comment. Barrow read it once fast, once slow. When he finished the second read, he pressed both palms flat on the surface. They're classifying the Mosul reference, he said. And the Raqqa operation, he said. And the confirmed engagement record above Tier 2. The decoration exists. Her name is attached to it. Neither can be referenced in any non-classified document. Barrow looked at the third paragraph. Read it carefully. They're expanding the program, he said. She'll lead the training component, Thea said. Official role. Acknowledged on record. Not fully classifiable without classifying the program itself, and they're not willing to do that. Her name in that capacity cannot be entirely erased. He paused. It's not justice. I want to be clear that I know it's not justice, but it's more than existed 3 days ago. Barrow was quiet for a long time. Then is it enough? No, Thea said without hesitation. But it's a start, and it's real. And in 9 operations, it's more than there has ever been. And I'll keep pushing. He looked at Barrow. She needs to hear it from me. I know, Barrow said. Go tell her. At 0545 on a Friday morning, she came out of the accommodation block with her rifle case and her canvas bag and walked toward the gate in the same quiet, purposeful walk she'd had when she stepped out of that civilian pickup on Tuesday. The walk that had read as wrong when she arrived read now as exactly what it was. The walk of a person who knows where they're going and has never required anyone's confirmation to proceed. She stopped. Standing at the gate in the early dark were 31 people who had gotten up before dawn on a Friday because they wanted to be there. Not because anyone had ordered it, because they had chosen it, which is a different thing, and the difference is the point. Duff was in the back. He met her eyes across the space between them and gave her a nod that was small and serious and meant everything it was trying to mean. Clegg was near the front. His eyes, when they found hers, said what his posture was trying to say and couldn't quite reach. Thea stepped forward. He raised his hand. The salute he gave her in the clear Friday morning air was not the same as the one on the landing pad 48 hours before. That one had been immediate, reflexive, the response of a man witnessing something extraordinary and reacting to its weight. This one had been thought about, chosen, given not in the heat of aftermath but in the ordinary light of a morning that had not yet asked anything of anyone, which made it mean something different. This one said, "We know who you are. We have thought about it. We are choosing to say so." She returned it. And then, one by one, 31 people raised their hands in the pre-dawn dark of a forward operating base in northeastern Syria, and the woman they had laughed at 4 days earlier stood in the cold and received what 8 years of service had earned and almost never found. Barrow was last. He held the salute a beat longer, not for ceremony, because he needed that one extra second to hold it all without looking away. She picked up her bags. She walked through the gate. She did not look back, not because the moment hadn't mattered, not because the 31 people standing in the cold hadn't returned something to her that the long years of anonymity had compressed into something small and nearly unrecognizable. It had mattered. It had mattered more than she had allowed herself to expect, and the surprise of that, the specific shock of being seen by people who had first chosen not to look, had done something to her that she would be processing for a long time. She didn't look back because she was already thinking about the next ridgeline, the next window, the next problem that needed solving in the dark, alone, by someone with the capacity to solve it. She was 31 years old. She had been doing this since she was 23, and she would keep doing it. Not because the institution had finally acknowledged her. Not because 31 people had stood at a gate in the cold, not because Thies had put her name in a report, or Clegg had said her name instead of sweetheart, or Barrow had sat with her at 3 a.m. over a topographic map and talked to her like the professional she was. Though all of those things had mattered enormously. She would keep doing it because there were people in dark places who needed what she could do. And she had never once in 8 years been able to stand in front of that need and choose herself instead. Barrow stood at the gate long after the vehicle carrying her to the airfield disappeared into the gray of the early morning. Duff came to stand beside him. Neither of them spoke for a while. Then Duff said, "She knew my name when she arrived before I said a word to her." "She read everyone's record before she came," Barrow said. Duff turned that over. "Why?" Barrow looked at the empty road. "Because she takes people seriously before they've given her any reason to." He paused. "Even when they haven't done the same for her." Duff was quiet for a long time. The sky above the escarpment was beginning to change at its eastern edge, that particular dark blue before light, before the day decides to continue. "I'm going to try to deserve that," Duff said. Not to Barrow, not to the road, just out loud, because some things need to be said out loud in order to become real. Barrow looked at him, 20 years old, 8 months deployed, standing at a gate in the early morning, in the middle of the process of becoming something better than where he had started. "Yeah," Barrow said. "You are?" They stood there until the light came over the desert, and at FOB Tanner, from that morning forward, no one who had stood on that landing pad or at that gate ever again made the mistake of deciding who someone was before they had seen what that person could do. Because the most capable person in any room is not always the one who arrives the way you expected. Sometimes she arrives in a civilian truck with a canvas bag and gray eyes that have seen more than the room will ever know. And the only question that has ever mattered, the only question that will always matter, is whether you are wise enough to see her before she has to prove it to you again.